Welcome to Loyalize,
a podcast brought to you by D Squares about customer relationships and retention. I'm Yasmin.
and I'm Bob, and on this podcast we invite world-leading experts to dive into the world of building strong loyalty.
Today I'm joined by Mohy Aboualam, CEO and co-founder of TheDar.AI. Could you just give me a brief introduction?
We're an AI company that helps retailers and PR agencies handle their internal and external data with AI that can help them make better decisions, improve their operations, boost their revenues, and get to know their customers a little bit better.
Could you tell me a little bit about your why? Why did you get into the AI world and what inspired you to start Darwin's?
So in university, I graduated from Imperial College London in 2019, and my thesis was about AI and food. I'm passionate about both. And the idea of the thesis was to create an AI chef that could recommend new recipes. So if you can imagine, on presentation day, I came with 8 plates of different foods that were recommended by my engine. 2 of them were terrible, but 6 of them were actually very good. And I passed because of the taste of the plates. So yeah, when I graduated, I decided, okay, I really want to continue my journey in AI. And I met my co-founder, Ahmed Al-Azhari, who was vice president of Vodafone Egypt for 11 years, heading the AI and data science team there on data from 40 million customers. And we decided to formulate Darwin's AI to take that know-how and that AI expertise and provide it to less techie companies that can still benefit from the value of AI.
So why now?
In 2012, I think, or 2013, Eric Schmidt, who was the former CEO of Google, he came out and said that the next big companies will be startups that use what was then new, the idea of having GPS on smart mobile devices. So if you can imagine, in 2012, it was still new to kind of look at Google Maps or Apple Maps to know where you're going. And that's exactly what he was talking about. And fast forward to today, you'll find that some of the biggest startups or companies now are ones like Jahiz, Talabat, Careem, Uber, Swivel, etc., who all depend on the smart GPS feature that's in the smart devices to provide mobility for their consumers or mobility product for their consumers. So 2 years ago, Eric predicted again, and he was like, the next big companies will be ones that use AI and machine learning to learn how to solve a problem very, very well and then offer it in the form of smart apps to other people around the world who face the same problem. And that's exactly what we're doing. We want to be one of those companies.
So what problems are you solving?
So the problems we're solving were focused on the retail, entertainment, and hospitality industry. A lot of retail owners now have to deal with internal data sources like their transaction history, their client data, customer data, as well as what's happening on the outside, like social media, trends, reviews. And to kind of handle all of that is a hassle, and you need a big team to do it. So what we're doing is we're offering them a retail expert that they can put in their pocket. It's called Dida. And it analyzes all of these different data sources to give them a proper data management experience to ensure they can actually increase their performance based on AI and data.
What was the best dish and the worst dish from your thesis?
So the best thing was strawberry and chocolate. I know it seems obvious, but when I trained the model, I did not give strawberry and chocolate as a dessert recipe. It wasn't included in the training set. So when it recommended it, it was as if it's new, even though it's been out there for decades, but it was as if it's new. So yeah, we took credit for that. One of the terrible ones, there were 2. One of them I remember included oregano, pistachios, garlic, and some odd other ingredient that just does not fit the profile at all. And they tasted that. It didn't go well, but then the other ones kind of brought the room back into life.
It's an interesting way to showcase the limitations of AI. Consumer preferences, they're too
fast-paced. Definitely. I think a lot of people overestimate the real capability of AI, but the reality is AI still has a long way to go. And we're here to see it grow and flourish.
Exactly. And I think, as we know, AI is very instrumental in the loyalty space and customer experience space when it comes to driving forward program scalability as well as customer satisfaction, whether that's through hyper-personalization or product recommendations or whatever it may be. But this episode, I want us to focus on the practical ways that AI can be actioned, how businesses can action AI in order to boost customer experience with a focus on the future, 2025 specifically. We know how agile or how fast-paced AI and LLMs move. So I wanted to dive into that with you. But before we dive into that, I want to play a quick game of Would You Rather / quick fire questions.
Let's do it.
Would you rather an AI-powered chatbot or a human representative to handle your queries?
I would say a human representative, just because usually when I call a business up because I have queries, I have too many questions, and sometimes I'm confused myself about the questions I want to ask. So having a human kind of allows more of a discussion where I don't have to wait for it to respond. We can have a discussion about whatever it is.
More flexibility.
Exactly. And if they're passionate about the business or if they know their way around the business, I think that's the best way to get my query answered.
Interesting. So AI still has some limitations that can't handle.
Definitely. We'll see where it goes in 3 to 5 years from now. But for now, personally, I prefer dealing with a human representative. Yeah.
Next question. Would you rather trust AI to surprise you with a personalized birthday gift, or would you rather choose it yourself?
For the sake of having to make less decisions, I would say an AI agent, but also I'd prefer AI to surprise me because I know that it can think outside the box, kind of. Sometimes it brings ridiculous suggestions, but sometimes it might think of something for me that I haven't tried before. But based on my preferences, I might actually like that. Whereas someone would probably get me a gift based on something I've said or something I've told them I liked before. So I think AI would be able to surprise me for the good or the bad a bit better.
Hopefully no more pistachio. Okay, what's an AI pet peeve that you have?
So I was just talking to one of our partners a few months ago, and he had such high expectations of AI. He was like, I implemented AI, we did this and that, and it's not telling me exactly how we're going to perform in the last quarter of the year and how we're supposed to do this and that. So the misconception here that I found with him, and that was common with a lot of people, I think, is that AI is a crystal ball where you're going to look into the ball and it's just going to tell you, oh yeah, you're supposed to do this, that, you're doing this wrong, etc. But the reality is, if you don't have a basis of the data that you're giving it, if you're giving it garbage in, you'll get garbage out. So it's not a crystal ball. It needs to be taught, just like a child needs to be taught. So the data you give it, the way you teach it, all of that actually influences its the end product or its usefulness.
I think that's the perfect way to capture that AI engines still need human intervention and human input.
You program them, you train them, you do everything. You choose what data they look at. You can guide them to look at different sources and others to look away from. So yeah, definitely human intervention is needed. It's what someone like me does.
We're going to dive into how to moderate AI a bit later, because I think that's important when it comes to, like you say, training it and maximizing its impact. So, okay, I like to ask people this question because I think it captures the psychology behind loyalty. So if you could define loyalty in 3 words, what would they be?
Okay, so the first 3 words that come to mind: family, pets, and rewards.
Okay, 3 completely different.
Yeah, the first 3 things that came to my mind.
Okay, let's dive into how businesses can start right. In order to implement AI, what do businesses first need to understand or establish beforehand?
I think we touched upon the fact that AI isn't a crystal ball. So you need to, first of all, manage your expectations and have a strategy for it like anything else. Be patient, but also know that you have like a plan to work on. With AI, the essentials, like the nutshell of what you need, is a domain expert and an AI expert. So the domain expert is someone who understands the industry, so someone who understands the business very well, its objectives. Are you trying to increase revenues? Are you trying to retain customers? Are you trying to cut costs, make operations more efficient? What is your goal and how do you currently do it? So that's the domain expert. They need to team up with the AI expert, who's kind of like the mechanic for a car. So you have the brain of how the car currently works, and then the mechanic who's asked, okay, can we automate this? Is there a way where AI can influence this, help us with this? And that's how to set up proper plan, a domain expert with an AI expert.
So managing your expectations, setting the right goals, and having the two experts, the industry expert or the business expert, like you said, domain, and the AI expert to synergize.
Exactly.
So for businesses that don't know where or how to start with implementing AI, for customer experience specifically, what sort of areas or what priorities should businesses have?
I think the first area they need to focus on is how do they manually retain these customers? Are they sending out campaigns? Are they sitting in a room and deciding what gifts are we going to send our clients today? And then based on that, working from that, so that's kind of like their baseline, and they're trying now to incorporate AI to achieve more. Maybe their baseline is good enough, so it's not about forcing AI. It's maybe your baseline or your way of doing things is good enough. But it's highly likely that if you use recommendation engines, if you use certain tools that can work with your digital data, which I think a lot of businesses struggle with, because a lot of businesses, their data is still not digitized properly. So everything we talk about in terms of AI, recommendation, and all of that doesn't mean anything to them.
Having the right data strategy is essential.
Yes, a good digital transformation strategy. So we need to be digitized first, have this data highly accessible to the AI model or the AI expert that will come in and build these models, or even for the off-the-shelf tools that currently exist by some of the AI giants, and then implementing the AI. But you have to have a digital strategy that kind of lays down the fundamentals for the AI coming in.
So when businesses come to map out their customer journey, what specific areas do you think should be tackled first?
I think customer experience to begin with. So are these businesses selling apps or are they selling one-off products? What are they doing? So depending on that, they need to see, where do our customers find us? Do they find us online? Do they find us walking into a store? Do they see us? So managing all these different customer touch points and trying to gather as much data in a respectful and private, anonymized way from these different customer touch points to see what reality for the customer is, like the business from the customer side. What does it look like? What does the store look like? What does the online website look like? What does the checkout look like? All of these questions. And then starting to implement AI mechanisms in certain areas to improve the customer experience, or digitization in certain areas. Doesn't have to be AI necessarily.
If AI is done right, how should the customer feel? Or what benefits should the customer be getting?
I think if AI is done right from a consumer perspective, the customer will feel respected. They won't feel like, oh, you know too much about me, or why this is freaky. I was looking at this and then I found it on my phone 2 minutes later. I think that's a bit much for everyone. But at the same time, they should feel like the brand cares about them and actually knows them personally. It's hard for a brand to know millions of customers at the same time. It's just not realistic. But AI can help the business feel and understand each and every customer, and hence deliver to the consumer messages that feel personalized and feel relevant to them, not just unnecessary bulk messaging and spamming.
So to recap what you were saying, a customer should feel respected and they should feel like the brand is speaking directly to them and in a lean way. So let's say a business has digitized their data and they already have a system. What are the best practices for integrating AI into that existing system?
The best practices would be to get an AI expert who understands their current system, or even talk to their system provider, because a lot of system providers now integrate with AI partners to offer a seamless kind of two-in-one digital and AI experience, and they take it from there.
So obviously AI is essential for hyper-personalization. Usually the discussion around personalization is around functionality. But I wanted to ask you, what are the considerations needed to make it a good experience rather than just its function?
There's a lot of things they need to consider as businesses. So if we're talking, for example, about e-commerce businesses or even traditional traders who are digitized, like you said, and have an online presence. With AI, it can definitely personalize the experience and tell you with the most recent recommender systems and engines that are out there, how to target Yasmin, how to target Mohy, etc. But like you said, how am I going to actually deliver this message? I think sticking to the traditional ways of just sending an SMS or sending an email campaign could be good, like you've personalized the experience. But there's the next step of omni-channel selling, and that's kind of a term where you have your customers touching your Instagram page, your Facebook, your different kind of social media, then coming into your store, then looking at your website. The real challenge is understanding that the customer journey between your different channels and using AI to target them at each channel, again, respectfully and in a different way, so that they feel like they keep getting convinced more and more, as if you have like a bar level of, is the customer convinced to get this or not? And every time they come to one of your channels, when your message is personalized and consistent, they're more convinced to get whatever you're trying to sell them. So I think omni-channel methodology is going to be a big thing moving forward. It already is, but it's going to grow even more.
I'm glad you mentioned omnichannel loyalty, because that's definitely something that's being brought back into the discussion recently, especially in industries where, like you said, different touch points are needed. So, for example, like in retail or in hospitality. But then that brings me to, what's the right balance?
The best way to figure it out, because it's different for different businesses, is to do something called A/B testing, where you're going to take a sample of your audiences, test a certain hypothesis on them, or a certain, I believe that we should, for example, send them this discount at this channel and a free item on another channel. And Yasmin believes we should do it the opposite way around. Let's test this tier. Let's use AI and digitization to give us the ability to test on samples to segment our customers. And then the segment that fulfills the objective we're trying to do, we then roll it out for our whole customer base. So I would say digitization with A/B testing.
That's a big topic when it comes to moderating AI as well, especially in customer experience. Could you tell me a little bit more about how we can moderate AI?
With AI, there's a thing called prompt engineering, where you kind of, just like when you go on to ChatGPT and you ask it a question and then it answers and you're like, okay, you need to tweak this a bit, give me a better summary if you have like an essay that you're submitting or something like that. In the same way, when you're creating models, you're the mastermind behind the model and you have control on the different weights and what it considers as something that's within its scope and what isn't in its scope and what's offensive and what's not offensive and all of these different things. So with the right engineering process of creating the model and tweaking the model and prompting the model, if it's an LLM, for example, you can definitely control what's in and out of scope. And test. Don't just roll it out and expect it to behave well. You need to test all of the different kind of things so that you ensure that you're the one who gets to deal with the bad AI before it turns into a good, well-taught AI agent.
Okay, so I want to move on to how we can maximize the impact of AI to the best of its ability. So you were speaking about AI as a tool, and I agree. How does one go about choosing, or how can businesses go about choosing the right AI tools for their business?
That's a very good question. I think it depends on definitely depends on the business. Let's assume that your workforce does 100% every day. 30 to 40% of that work is probably very repetitive, very boring, might be the reason why they want to leave the company and switch out to another role, where they end up finding that any job has 30 to 40% of the less creative aspect of work. So AI isn't at a point where it can replace a human, and I don't think it'll ever be at that point, but it is at a very good point where it doesn't get bored. If you ask it to do a task 1,000,000 times, it will do it 1,000,000 times, and it'll do it well. If it's a task that does not require that much creativity, just requires good logic and reasoning. So I would recommend encouraging your users and your employees to try out different AI tools and then stick with one that does that 30 or 40% to allow the humans to do the remaining 60% and replace that 30% with more creativity, more R&D, better output of work. I read something where they said that 5-day work weeks can be reduced to 3-day work weeks. I think in my company, that's not something we'll do anytime soon. But you can get this better output from people if you just replace that 20 to 30% of grunt work that we all have to do on a daily basis, whether through automating Excels, creating those PowerPoint presentations, writing certain stuff.
How about in the customer experience side of things? And I guess it differs for every industry. I mean, if we think of retail, for example, or perhaps banking, what are the different tools that you think if a business doesn't have now, then they're falling behind?
I think if we're talking about banking or loaning and fintech kind of companies, if you don't have a proper AI-backed credit scoring model, then you're really falling behind. The reason I say that is because a lot of these big fintech companies are kind of disrupting the banking industry by allowing or providing credit to people who do not have access to credit the traditional way, where I submit certain paperwork, where you need to do a lot of manual background checks before you give me the credit. No, I can just go onto my phone. An AI credit scoring model asks for certain documents and paperwork, and it analyzes and gives me back a decision. If you think on the larger scale of how positively this can impact our economy and give credit to people who might not have the right means right now, but getting that credit will allow them to build a business or work on themselves or give a better education to their kids, whatever it is, that's a really positive use of AI. So I think with banking, credit scoring specifically is now a fundamental part. It's not something you can work without.
I like the phrase you used about positive uses of AI, and I'm going to ask you about negative uses. But I also wanted to ask you about reward structures. How can AI impact?
AI can impact reward structures in different ways. The best way possible is to feed back to the AI model whether the reward was accepted by the customer or not. So I'm going to send, or the digital engine is going to send the reward to Yasmin. If Yasmin took this reward, then that feedback should be given back to the AI model to understand that this type of reward Yasmin likes. If we send her the same reward again and she doesn't accept it this time, then this feedback will also be given back to the AI. So it'll start learning, okay, Yasmin is changing, so we need to start trying different ways of rewarding her. So the best thing about AI in recommender systems or rewarding systems, like you said, is the ability for it to be dynamic and adaptive rewarding that actually follows your changing needs and changing consumer behavior.
I think when it comes to loyalty, AI is going to impact rewards the most because, as you said in the beginning, how you define loyalty, rewards is a main component. And I think that's where a lot of change and evolution can happen. So back to negative uses of AI. What are they? So
like with any new technology, there's a lot of negative uses. Like if you've recently watched, or not recently anymore, if you've watched Oppenheimer, you've seen what the purpose of the technology was and then how it was negatively used. So with AI, you can use it to spread, for example, fake news, create certain messages or graphics on people or public figures that aren't real, they weren't them, and hence influencing public opinion, direction, etc. But then again, with any new groundbreaking technology, you can find negative uses. So if you have the right frameworks legally as well as ethically, then you should be able to mitigate most of the negative impact that can have, and we can then focus on some of the positive things like we've discussed earlier.
Again, that really emphasizes the importance of moderation,
yep,
like you mentioned earlier. What tips would you give businesses for staying agile?
I think read online. AI is developing every day, and you get a lot of the new announcements on the new technologies. Like, for example, the most common one, ChatGPT, which started with 3.0 and then moved to 4.0, and now they're at 4.15, etc. So read online, stay up to date, because even if you think the technology isn't for you right now, you never know in 3 months what the technology will be able to do, and then maybe then it'll be ready for you.
You've mentioned some of the common pitfalls when it comes to AI and implementing and managing expectations. What other pitfalls are there?
I think judging it too quickly. So a lot of people implement these AI models and they think they're like systems, like programs where, okay, I have a system now, so it should do this. But with AI, it learns from data. And just like we learn from changing consumer needs, it's gonna learn from all of the new data that keeps getting fed into it as it's applied to your business. So have the right expectations on how long it'll take to be able to achieve a certain objective or a certain level of accuracy, and be mindful of that.
A big thing right now is sentiment analysis. That's the main discussion right now. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that and how businesses can utilize that?
So a little history on sentiment analysis. A few years ago, before GPT technology and Gen AI in general, the way they calculated sentiment was to look at the dictionary of the language and define certain words as positive words and certain words as negative. And basically to say whether a comment is positive or negative or an article, you'd count the number of positive words, count the number of negative words, add them together. And if the number is greater than 0, it's a positive sentiment. If it's less, it's a negative sentiment. And of course, in our region, with sarcasm in the Arabic language and the way someone can say, oh, you're amazing at that, but they're actually making fun of you, that would be treated then as a positive thing. But if you understand the context and the language, it's actually a negative, that they're making fun of you. So right now, technology has evolved to start adapting into context. With certain languages and certain regions, it's much better than others.
Interesting. That brings me to a question that's been popping in my head about LLMs in the region.
Yeah. So ChatGPT, Llama, all of these different models that people have become used to. Like you can actually chat with Llama, the model by Facebook, through WhatsApp now. It's one of the latest things they've introduced. They're all doing groundbreaking work for English, like you said, and Western kind of languages. With our region, actually, there's a very cool project called Falcons AI that's based in the UAE. And they've invested hundreds of millions of dollars to kind of, I wouldn't say compete with OpenAI and ChatGPT and those models, but build the same capabilities for our language, for our region. So that's going to be very cool to try out when it's out.
So if you were to go back in time and you had to explain AI to people, what would you say?
I'd say it's as if you're teaching your child. So if you have a child, how does a child know what an apple is, what an orange is, what a banana is? They look at it, they see the color, they taste it, etc. So I tell them computers now have the ability to be taught just like a child. And I think that's the best way they kind of can resonate with the idea of teaching and what AI is all about.
So Mohy, let's bring out your crystal ball, not AI's crystal ball. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you if you could predict one game-changing AI innovation in the loyalty space in 2025, what would that be and why?
I think towards the omnichannel kind of area where we spoke about, where I feel like wherever I go to the different customer touch points, whether I'm talking to the business on WhatsApp or on Facebook, or I'm actually at the store, getting that same personalized message across, I think that's the next breakthrough. But the other thing is AI helping with product selection. So a lot of the recommender system now are like forced to recommend from whatever you're offering. But why can't it take into account the trends in general and what's happening outside and recommending it to the business owners to actually expand ways of expanding their product selection to meet with customer demands? So I think that's where the game changer will be, understanding external factors, not just basing it on internal factors and transaction history and stuff like that.
This has been a very interesting and eye-opening discussion. The first one being that AI is a tool and it's not replacing human intervention. In fact, both are needed to achieve a proper harmonious balance based on business goals. The second thing, which I think was interesting, that each business is its own animal, and therefore the way AI is then used is also different. The third takeaway for me was the impact that AI is currently having on loyalty and is going to continue to have on loyalty, especially in the rewards area. What we do know is that AI is instrumental in staying agile in order to keep up with consumer behaviors and changing consumer preferences. So thank you for this insightful conversation.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I think if we do it again sometime, AI will be at a very different level or a new area. So let's see where it takes us from here.